Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I'm so excited because I'm here to bring you my favorite books of 2018. This year has been an amazing year in reading for me, like amazing. I have read 60 books this year, but of course, when you read that many, it's like, well, what were the favorites if you like so many of them? So this video hopefully will answer that, and it hopefully will be able to be used as a resource for you watching as to some books to check out, possibly, I think you should, but I'm biased. And these are all from Black authors, primarily Black women writers. Without further ado, let's get into it. Coming in at number 20 is I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness. This was from the author Austin Channing Brown. This was released this year. This book is nonfiction, but it also classifies somewhat within the inspirational realm as well as a memoir. This is about the author Austin Channing Brown and her relationship with the Christian faith and race. This is an amazing book, especially if you are within the Christian faith, to read. I suggest anyone who is a Christian to read this book because I have never read a book that addresses race so directly in the correlation to that within the Christian faith and basically the nuances and also a lot of the struggles of being within the Christian faith when you are other than anything white, essentially. So I highly recommend it. Loved. I gave this 4 stars on Goodreads. Coming in at number 19 is Ta-Nehisi Coates' We Were 8 Years in Power, An American Tragedy. This is by the author Ta-Nehisi Coates, who is also the author of the other best-selling book, Between the World and Me. I was very intrigued to read this, and as you can see, I actually purchased it. That's how much I loved it because I rented it originally from the library, but when reading this is literally a wealth of knowledge. Like, this is 8 years of documented history. I love this book. This is a collection of Ta-Nehisi Coates' essays as well as articles, some which were previously published, some who are brand new for this book. But it basically dissects the 8 years of the Obama administration. A lot of these were published during that time. And kind of identifying and seeing the recipe for where we are right now and how we literally went from the Obama administration to this new administration and how some of those parallels or aligned to other points in history. This is really a history text. He uses so many references and there's so much knowledge about American history in general. And it's interesting how a lot of the stuff that we go through are not necessarily new, but just reincarnated forms of the former. But it does a great job of not only diving into Michelle Obama and also Barack Obama, but also the administration as a whole, what America looked like, what it meant for the nation, and basically how this led to where we are today. I highly recommend this. This is a textbook to me. I feel like this should be in schools. It's amazing. I gave this 4 stars, but it really was more like a 4.5. And I specifically recommend this on audio. Coming in at number 18, I have My Sister, the Serial Killer. This is by Unkindness Braithwaite, and I apologize for the pronunciation of that. This is actually a debut novel. It is pretty much like the title suggests. It's a suspense thriller, fiction clearly, and it's about a girl whose sister has a weird habit of killing her boyfriends and calling on her other sister, her older sister, to help her clean up the mess. It deals with a lot of stuff. It deals with basically like the patriarch society. It deals with everyday influences of social media. It deals with basically shallowness, jealousy, envy. It's like a lot of random little things that are not even random, but just in life, but with murders happening. I enjoyed this thoroughly. I really liked this. This was definitely one of those, I say, if you're into like dark comedy, give this one a go. Coming in at number 17 is the debut novel by Rivers Solomon, and Unkindness of Ghost. This cover, if we could give the best cover of 2018, this hands by would have it. When I saw the cover, I was awestruck, so I had to read it. It is science fiction, it is beautiful, it is Black. It's amazing, and it's everything other. I love the story. This is about a young girl, Aster, who is androgynous. She lives basically in space, and it follows her relationships as well as her oppression. She is basically one of the lower deck. It's so hard to explain this book again because it's so otherworldly, where a lot of the terminology, when you're hearing it, doesn't necessarily translate to current society, which also makes it semi-difficult to get into within the beginning. But trust me, once you get into the story, you will not let it go. It is amazing. I was so warped. There was moments where I was literally crying and weeping. Like, it was just incredible. The story is about a young Aster who is basically what we would know as a slave. But this is in space. She is other. She's dark. She is androgynous. She doesn't necessarily fit in anywhere. And she is oppressed by basically what can translate as from her overseers. And this novel touches on so many different levels of relationships, who we call family, what we choose as family, as well as how we use our gifts and our strengths in that otherness to combat societal norms and societal standards. I love the book also because it touches on science, hence science fiction. She is into all things science, from plants to different concoctions, different medicine building, operating, so many different stuff. And it's just beautiful to watch. Loved it. Coming in at number 16 is Heads of the Colored People by Nafisa Thompson Spires. Now, this is a collection of short stories. This is my first short story collection to make the top 20, but it is not my last. This was also released in 2018, and it's a beautiful story of basically colored people, of Black individuals, and so many funny short stories. This was just beautifully thought out. I thought it was super witty. Some of the stories I still relate to so vividly. One of my favorites is probably called The Bell Letters, which is basically two mothers going back and forth over their daughters who have gotten into trouble because they're basically at odds with each other at school, but they happen to be the two only Black girls in the school, and turns out they're fighting. And in the attempt for the mothers to get the girls to squash it, they end up bickering themselves within the letters. But then, I won't give it away, but the ending of it is very, very cute. That's just one of the stories, but it literally touches on one of the only Black ASMR YouTubers on there, and it deals with like one of the only Black male professors at a university, and it's just so witty. And that's the best way to describe it. I love the collection very, very much. I gave it a solid 4 stars on Goodreads. Coming in at number 15 is The Wedding Date. This is by Jasmine Guillory, and this is a romance novel. Yep, a romance book made my top 20. Now, this is very similar to me to a Lifetime movie. That is what one of my subscribers wrote, and I was like, that is the perfect description. Like, it gives you that warm, cheesy feeling on the inside, but it was very delicious and very entertaining to read it. This made my top 20 because it made me feel good. Reading it made me happy. It was fresh. It was invigorating. This was released this year, and although this was the author's debut, she has already released another book called The Proposal, which was also so great. I just like a good cheesy romance, and that's what this was. This follows basically a young Black woman who gets stuck on the elevator with a young white man who is in desperate need of having a date to a wedding of his ex-girlfriend. So somewhere along the line, they agreed to fake like they're in a relationship, but clearly they end up falling in love, and that whole weird, are we friends, are we not, are we serious, are we not, and that whole thing. So it's a cute little ride that you take, and I just love the cheesiness and the goodness feels of the book. Highly recommend it. I gave this 4 stars. Coming in at number 14, this is Creative Quest by Questlove. Look at this. This is another nonfiction. I don't know if you can classify this as self-help, because really it's not even self-help. This is a guide to your best creative self. Yes, is kind of how it's sold. This book is perfect for those of you who want to tap into how to maximize your creativity. Questlove, if you don't know him, look him up. He has dived into so many things, from music to television to cooking to who knows what's next. And he just talks about when you have all these interests on basically kind of what has worked for him on harnessing and maximizing his creativity. I love this book so much that I purchased it. I definitely love it. This is also a good runner-up for an amazing cover. Very, very cute. I hear this is amazing on audiobook, but I haven't listened. But I do plan on revisiting this via audio as well, just because I felt like there were so many gems and so many things that aligned with some of the principles that I already felt like in my gut were true. But this kind of like more so affirmed them. And I feel like it just gave me a boost of creative energy this year. So I recommend this. This was another 2018 release. We are almost to the top 10, you guys. Coming in at number 13, you've heard me talk about this so many times. This is Well Read Black Girl. This is an anthology that was curated by Glory Edom, who, if you are not familiar, that is the creator of Well Read Black Girl, which started off as a book club in Brooklyn, turned into a festival, and now has a collection of amazing Black female writers. This is amazing. This is a short story, you can say, almost collection, because this is different writers writing about their falling in love with reading. Some of the contributors to this are Jasmine Ward, Tiare Jones, Morgan Jerkins, Jacqueline Woodson, and the list goes on and on and on. So many beautiful Black female writers. You will definitely learn of a few. I also think this is amazing for just the thought that went behind this, because there is a resource and kind of like a table of contents for all of the books that were mentioned in here, as well as all of the books from the different writers that were featured in here. So anytime a book was mentioned, whether it was, oh, my favorite read as a child was Amazing Grace, that's listed in there with the author's name, as well as there's just different references throughout this book. I highly recommend it. I think this is just an amazing, quick, easy read and would make a great gift. So pick this one up. Coming in at number 12, this book was actually released in 2016, but it made my list because I read it this year. So this is one of my top 20 read this year. And that is a memoir by Trevor Noah. It is Born a Crime. Oh my goodness. This memoir was so enjoyable. I can't believe a memoir that basically centers on how his pure existence was a crime because he was born in apartheid in South Africa, and he's biracial. So like, just starting off on that, I don't even understand how that story can turn into something that is so comical but also so real and relatable. I feel like the author did a great job on tying in a lot of the history throughout South Africa, as well as the history through his childhood, as well as honoring his mother, Patricia. I definitely say, if you haven't read this, to give this a read. I plan on listening to it on audio. Although I read it, I had so many subscribers tell me that on audio it's even funnier and even better. This was one of my most enjoyable memoirs that I've read. I loved it. Coming in at number 11 is another memoir that was released in 2018, and this made Oprah's book club. This is The Sun Does Shine: How I Found Life and Freedom on Death Row by Anthony Ray Hinton. This is the true story of his life and how he spent 30 years wrongfully incarcerated and in prison on death row. How does this happen? Well, this happens more than you would like to think. This book touches on so much, but what I loved most about this book is how it did the perfect balance of, given the facts of his life, outline some of the injustices in our judicial system, as well as outline how he survived that and his hope throughout life. This book is more about hope than anything else. I would highly recommend to give this a read. This book touched me, and this is actually the only 5-star book that I have that did not make my top 10. This was a very tough decision to not have this in the top 10, because I did give it 5 stars. I wouldn't change anything about the story. I mean, it is his story, but not only that, I wouldn't change anything about the way that it was written. I definitely think you should give this one a read. Just amazing. We are now in the top 10. This one was a tough one. This one was actually more so number 10 and 11. It was hard for me to figure out which one to put into which. Somehow, this beat out the last memoir, though. And I can understand why. Coming in at number 10 is Michelle Obama's Becoming. This is her memoir. If you don't know, this has been on the bestsellers list right now. It just came out. I finished this. You see all of the notes. I own this. I listened to some of it on audio. This is about our former First Lady and basically her life, from growing up in the South Side of Chicago to going to college at Princeton, to her career as a lawyer, to falling in love with Barack, and just basically all that she has becoming a mother, a wife, the First Lady of the United States, and becoming her own. She deals with all of the trials that she's gone through. The reason why this made my top 10, although I gave this 4 stars when I finally finished this, was because I feel the impact of this read is something that everybody should read, especially if you have an interest in Michelle Obama. The beginning of the book is beautifully written, as well as her initial meetings with Barack will make you just fall in love. I think this is an amazing book to either read or listen to on audio. There were some great gems in there. There were certain things that I didn't necessarily love about the book, which is why, of course, that it ended up being a 4-star. But I will say that it was a healthy balance. And towards the end of the book, it kind of tied things up in such a great way that left me replenished. And for some of those issues that I did have, definitely check out. I did a whole podcast episode on our first podcast episode of Left Unread. I will link that somewhere here. Definitely check that out. We deep dive into this because this is a very complex memoir. It's very complex. There's so many different levels to this. Anyways, all in all, this rounded out my top 10, and I think you should read it as well. So coming in at number 9 is actually my number 1 memoir that I read this year. Who could that be? Who could that be after listing Becoming? Number 9 was Gabrielle Union's We're Gonna Need More Wine. I know this didn't come out this year, but I read it this year. And oh my gosh, this was by far my favorite my favorite memoir that I read this year. I had no idea what to expect when reading this. Honestly, I was just reading this because Gab just feels like the girl next. I called her Gab. I feel like I know her. That's what she feels like to me. So I was like, oh, her life might be interesting. Little did I know that she is just brilliant. She's an amazing writer. Her storytelling capabilities are out of this world. I also did a standalone review for this. I cannot rave highly enough. I mean, there are points where I had tears in my eyes because I was laughing that hard. There were points where I was boohoo crying. She took you on a journey, and she literally touched every issue you can think about. She talks about all of these different nuances, and it's packed into one book, and you're not just learning about her life, but you're getting little gems from her. I love this book. I cannot rave about it highly enough. Just read it. Great stuff. We are getting into it in this top 10. Coming in at number 8 is actually the only strictly poetry book to make my top 20. Isn't that crazy? I read some really good poetry books this year, but for some reason it's really hard for a poetry book to be the best book that I read. But no, this Don't Call Us Dead by Donna Smith, I don't even know what to say. This is just beautiful. This is beautiful. I actually had to purchase this. The poems make you want to understand how someone could be so talented and depict your emotions. I think this is just a read that everybody should listen to. It has so many nuances. It touches on homosexuality and the view of that. It touches on being black. It touches on being black and LGBTQ. It touches on America. It touches on your wishes, your hopes, your dreams. It touches on everything, and it captured my little heartstrings. I cannot rave about this hard enough. Words really won't do this justice. I really love how beautifully and aesthetically pleasing the print on this is. It's just different from a lot of the poetry that I've read. Some of them are more traditional, but Yeah. Like, this poetry book was literally art. That's how I felt about it. So it was a no-brainer that this was going to be in my top 10. And it was. This was another 5-star review for me. Loved this. Coming in at number 7, this is getting juicy. We're almost to the top 5. This is a fiction novel, but I think this is historical fiction. This is She Would Be King. This is an astonishing debut novel. The author herself's parents are from Liberia, and I believe she was as well, but moved here at a young age in Texas, if I'm not mistaken. But do not quote me on that. But what I love about this is historically accurate. The story itself follows several different individuals, not just one in particular. I mean, there's someone who is on a plantation in America, another one on a plantation in Jamaica, another one in Liberia or current day Liberia. And it follows these individuals who have these special gifts, but who are also other. They are not accepted by societal norms. One is deemed as a witch. A lot of the other one is a mulatto, biracial, so he's not accepted. And another one is just basically orphaned and is super strong. They have these supernatural gifts, and essentially you follow their life story, and it's woven in together. And why I think I love this so much is because I have been working on writing actually a novel. It's not similar in the way that it was written, but it's similar in the intersectionality of all these different groups coming together. And this is a journey. Like, there's so much loss and there's so much triumph at the same time, and so much emotion packed into this book. But what I love most about it is how historically accurate it is. For instance, in Jamaica, the Maroons and their history of basically, revolting against their masters and getting their slice of somewhat what looked like freedom for them. And it doesn't hold back. Like, it's accurate it's historically accurate, but it's using these fictional characters to bring to life a lot of the accuracies, and also the accuracies of slaves here in America going back to Africa and what that looked like. Some going to Nova Scotia, like what that really looked like. And I just thought it was beautifully well done. Another thing that I loved about this was, people classify this as magical realism, which I get in some ways what that means, but it's always weird when I hear that term, because a lot of West African culture, Haitian culture, different cultures across the diaspora, this isn't magical realism. This is just stories and truths that we either believe or we either heard of. It's not this mystical wow thing. It's just more so what is. One of the stories in particular that's mentioned in here is one that I heard as a kid. Like, this is something that my parents told me, and it wasn't said in like a folklore like way. Like, it was said like this happened, and to read that in a book was crazy for me. Like, it was like, wow. So I just feel like the author herself did an extreme amount of research, as well as used her creative abilities to weave into factual situations as well as culturally factual situations to make this epic book we call She Would Be King. And I would have to do a deep dive of this. Just know that this book, amazing. You should read it. Coming in at number 6 is Coon by Zora Neale Hurston. This is the story of the last black cargo. This also was released in 2018. Clearly it was written before that because it was written by Zora Neale Hurston, but this was actually never published. So when this came out, I was so eager to read it. It is the true story, the last black slave that was brought to America. So this is someone who literally survived, had life in Africa, left as a teen, or was kidnapped as a teen, I should say, survived the Middle Passage, survived slavery, and was now free and was able to be interviewed. This is history at its best. I am so thankful that Zora Neale Hurston took the time to document this and to interview Cudjo, to get this story of Cudjo Lewis. And I was just blown away. This story took my breath away. I have a full detail review on it. It's not a long story at all, and it literally feels like you are in the room and Cudjo is talking to you. And it's just an amazing, incredible read, and one of the most appreciated impactful reads, this was another one that I just had to purchase to own. Top five. Okay, coming in at number 5 is a short story collection. This was released in 2017. This is What It Means When a Man Falls from the Sky, and this is from Leslie Arima. This was my favorite short story collection that I read this year. Simply took my breath away. The stories are beautifully woven together and just separate. Like, lyrically, this was just delicious to take in, but it's also one that just felt so real. You feel yourself wanting more and more and more of the characters that are introduced, and you kind of want each of these sections to be turned into full-out novels. And that's beautiful short storytelling to me. A lot of the stories were relatable. Some of the most relatable ones for me, which I actually go into more of a deep dive in my other videos, so I won't take up too much time. But just know it's a journey that follows different women in different scenarios, from sisterhood to cousins to a relationship. One of the ones that touched me the most, I'll just tell this one, is a girl who lost her mother, and her mother came back after dying for a day, and she came back into the household, and basically the girl trying to forgive the mother and trying to learn to forgive herself. And it just broke me. Like, I don't know, it's just beautiful collection of stories, and beautifully thought out. I've never read a short story collection like it. So if you're trying to get into short stories, or if you just like short stories, I would say that is the book that you should read. Loved it. Speaking of lyrically beautiful, coming in at number 4 was Jasmine Ward's Sing Unburied Sing. This I actually read this year. This came out late in 2017. I didn't get to it until 2018, but nonetheless, amazing. Jasmine Ward is just an amazing writer. I don't know what else to say besides that. This follows, I have a whole actually video on this, but just a synopsis of this. This follows a lot of the South and basically what it looks like when you're in the South and you're poor and you have addiction. Like, this is a fiction novel surrounding all of those scenarios, but it's also what is it like when you are the child that's born into this situation. And it really focuses primarily on Leomi's son and his navigating the world when he has a mother and father who are not present. His mother has a drug addiction and his father is incarcerated. And he's biracial, and he's in the South, in Mississippi, and there's systemic racism that's involved, but there's also just hauntings and ghosts. And by ghosts, I literally mean like a haunting with you. It's lyrically and just beautiful. Again, this follows more so along the line of magical realism, which plays into effect in this, but in such a real, tangible way. It pulls you in. Like, this is a book where you are into the story and you could not be released. Like, I could not be released. There's actually a scene where they're driving in this car and so much is going on, and I could literally smell what they were smelling and felt like I was suffocating in that car with them. Like, that's how intense the writing was for me. I love this book. Coming in at number 3 is If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin. Oh my gosh. This book is romance and just beautifulness. Like, it's epic value level of romance, and it has inspired me to read even more of James Baldwin's fiction. This was written later in his life. This was written as if it could be released today. Like, this literally could have been a story written today. That's how relevant it is to the current times. It follows the young romance of two young individuals who are newly engaged, and basically one of them is wrongfully incarcerated, and it ties on how that affects those closest to him, around him, and also affects his young fiance. So though it sounds very kind of like dark and depressing, it's really more so a story about Black love, about romance, and it's intense. It's so beautiful, and it literally just moved me. I love this book. This was one of my favorite reads of the year. Coming in at number 2, this was so tough, but someone's got to be number 1. This was Tomi Adeyemi's Children of Blood and Bone. If you haven't heard of this, I don't know where you have been. This is fantasy at its best. this has already been signed on to be a ongoing series. This is gonna be produced. I can't wait to see it produced on the big screen, and also the next edition comes out next year. I haven't read anything like it. This was, the author describes as Black Panther with magic, but I feel like it was more than that. It was literally a story about young oppressed individuals, young people using their voice to overcome these stronghold systems, but it takes you on a journey you cannot believe. It follows primarily 4 different individuals, but it's told from 3 different character perspectives, and you hear all of their perspectives, from the privileged to the most oppressed to that of the brother or the sibling of the most oppressed. Magic was taken away from the people that they call Magi, which are known primarily for their super dark skin and their snow white hair because they have magic, but magic has been banished, and she has been tasked with bringing magic back. This is an epic adventure, amazing read. Although you see how thick this is a book that literally I finished within 2 days. I could not put the book down, and I cannot wait for any and all things Tomi Adeyemi and of this Children of Blood and Bone series. And my number 1 book of 2018, The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. This was my favorite read of the year, hands down. For me, this was just lyrically beautiful. This whole book is told in verse. This follows a young girl who is in New York, and it's like a coming of age story, but it's literally told throughout poetry. I love this book so much. After I rented it from the library, I not only purchased it, but then I listened to it on audio after reading it again. And it's just beautiful. This is a short read on the audiobook is like 3 hours and something minutes. So that lets you know how quickly you can get through this. But wow, wow, and wow. It was like I was falling in love for the first time and understanding the power of using your voice and using your talents and how that can impact your life. And also, it's a book that I feel like young girls, young teens would just, I wish this was written when I was younger, basically. Beautiful. I can't wait for the next novel to come out by Elizabeth Acevedo, which is happening in 2019. Can't wait for that. You have to read this. I think if you like poetry, if you like writing, if you like reading, you will love this. And I just love the identity. Like, she's an Afro Latina girl growing up in New York, dealing with stuff from being too tall, being told she's too this, too that, not enough this, not enough that, and how she combats that and finds her voice. And I just love it. As you see, I had a long list of amazing books that made my favorites. I hope you pick any of these up or some of these up and enjoy them as much as I did. I can't wait for 2019. It's going to be an amazing reading year, and I'm hoping you're there with me on this journey. And I hope you also decide to read more books by Black authors, more books by women writers, Black women writers. It's going to be an amazing 2019. So if you're not already, definitely make sure you subscribe. I post weekly videos on all things books and books by people of color. Well, I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Love and light, and happy 2019. Bye.